What's going on? A to Z Sports. Sam Phelan here with you for Titans at 2. Talking about Brian Callahan's press conference that got done earlier this afternoon at St. Thomas Sports Park. And boy, do we have a press conference to recap for all of you. Titans have been making headlines kind of for all the wrong reasons, as a 1-4 team is having a bit of an identity crisis. And not just an on-field football identity crisis, really an organizational identity crisis about where this football team goes from here, what they do at quarterback. Do they have the right head coach? Do they have the right general manager? This is not what this team was supposed to look like, especially given the money the Titans spent. Now 1-4 with another bad loss at home to a division rival in the Indianapolis Colts. Will Levis does not look very good. Calvin Ridley has 8 targets, no catches, 5 targets in the fourth quarter, no real targets until like the last 5 minutes of the game that he had a chance to catch. And Calvin Ridley sounded off in the Titans locker room afterwards when I asked him about it, saying, I need more catches early on in the game to get going. And he did not say it that nicely. A lot of expletives. So then today, the press conference with Brian Callahan was informative and for sometimes the wrong reasons. I mean, Callahan got grilled, to be honest with you. He was facing questions about Will Levis, facing questions about Calvin Ridley, about his locker room culture, about whether or not the Titans, basically staring down the barrel of that identity crisis I brought up. How can they get Ridley the ball more? Is it on him? Does he have what it takes? As a play caller, does his quarterback have what it takes? Does he still have faith in his quarterback? Why is the game plan so conservative? Why is DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley on the sideline on a 3rd and 4 in the first quarter of a game? And then we're sitting here talking about, I wonder why we can't get them the ball more frequently. It was a lot more than I'm going to be able to recap in this Titans at 2. These are a bit of a shorter form platform for me to just discuss what stood out to me, and a lot stood out to me today. Luckily, I'm back with A to Z Sports Primetime on Tuesday night. We've got plenty to talk about on Tuesday night, and there's more written content on atozsports.com as well, where you can get all of your Titans content. So my thoughts will be coming out throughout the week, but today I'm going to highlight 2 major points. 2 things that jumped out at me. One good, one bad for Brian Callahan. Because I think he did one thing very well, and as you see in the title, he defended Calvin Ridley in a way that I absolutely loved from the Titans head coach. So we're going to show you what he said about Calvin Ridley. We're going to give him his props, but then we're going to ask some hard questions because he also contradicted his quarterback. He contradicted Will Levis regarding, his shoulder injury, and I think it's not a great sign for Levis, to be honest, when we really dive into Callahan's comments here. So 1 positive from Callahan defending Ridley, 1 negative contradicting Levis. That's what we've got for you. But before we dive into all of it, going to remind you guys that Titans at 2 is brought to you by Lipscomb Sports Analytics, where data meets the game. Analyze, strategize, and revolutionize and turn your passion into profession by going beyond the box score, acquiring game-changing insights and career-defining skills. You can get off the sidelines and into the action with Lipscomb's Sports Analytics program, where you'll learn to make the calls that count. Their sport analytics program is turning sports fans into data-driven decision makers in the exciting world of professional athletics. At Lipscomb, they're not just watching the game, they're changing how it's played through innovative sports analytics. I turned my passion into profession at Lipscomb. I loved sports. I went and studied sports media. That's my alma mater, and they helped me get this job where I'm speaking to all of you now. And I get to love what I do every day. So you turn your passion into profession. If sports analytics are interesting to you, hit up Lipscomb. Go check them out. The best university in Nashville, in my very biased, but also maybe correct opinion. Check them out. Lipscomb University, sports analytics. Get all the insight that you need to go beyond the box score as we go behind the curtain and look into what Brian Callahan had to say. Let's start by tipping our cap to the Titans head coach because, listen, Calvin Ridley, his comments to me after the game have gone national. Sports Center, Bleacher Report. I was sitting at a Mexican restaurant earlier this afternoon, and I watched Calvin Ridley, what he was saying to me on ESPN. So it's everywhere. He's getting ripped for it a little bit. It's obviously creating national headlines. But I don't think Calvin Ridley was wrong to feel the way that he felt. I talked about it a little bit on this morning's show with Austin Stanley. This idea that Calvin Ridley did not have any targets in the game that really mattered and really were catchable until that fourth quarter. And the usage of the Titans personnel was very puzzling to me at times. Ridley and Hopkins not on the field, a very conservative play call from Brian Callahan that I thought, he admitted as much, actually. Like he said, conservative game plan going into the game. And it's no wonder a wide receiver who's paid $92 million because he's an elite wide receiver with elite talents, at least elite traits, who wants to have an impact, wants to get the ball, wants to help the team win. And he's watching his team lose. He's not getting involved. He's not getting opportunities to help the team. Of course, he's going to be frustrated. I think it was a good thing that Calvin Ridley aired this out. And I think it's a good thing that Calvin Ridley feels comfortable airing out some of his frustrations. I think that is a good sign of Brian Callahan as a coach. So I do want to give him credit for that. And I'll play this clip from this afternoon's press conference where I think Brian Callahan answered questions about Calvin Ridley's outburst, as it's referred to in this press conference, very, very well. You kind of talked about learning Joe Burrow and the comfort that you had with Joe telling you what he needs, doesn't need, likes, doesn't like. When a guy like Calvin after the game is talking about needing to get involved more early to feel better late, is there an adjustment that you feel like you should make to make him comfortable?
Yeah, I'll always take that into account when guys feel that. It's certainly not for it wasn't for lack of intent. That much I can tell you. And I told the things I talked to Calvin about for all receivers. This is a common conversation. Calvin's not the first one to know that he wants to get in a rhythm, and he certainly won't be the last. And the ability to get him the ball early is something that we tried to do. I had a couple plays called for him, and he can't control where the ball goes all the time, and he can't control if the ball gets batted, or he can't. Those are things out of his control. And so I don't mind it. I know Calvin wants to win. That's all he really wants to do. He wants to help us win. I love his passion. I love his drive to want to help the team and do the right things, because that's what ultimately all he wants to do is win and help and be a factor in that process. And he is a factor. We got to find ways to get the production early, late, whenever, because he's going to be part of the reason why we win. And that's ultimately hasn't been enough at this point, but. Yeah, I certainly appreciate the feedback, and those are things that I talk about with those guys all the time, and try to get them the ball when we can give them the ball.
Yesterday after the game, we saw an unusual for the Titans locker room display of kind of outbursts from guys and frustration. When you see that, do you concern that this group maybe doesn't have the culture or the togetherness that you thought initially?
Oh, not at all. I do. I believe in our locker room, and everything that we do on a daily basis tells me that. Outbursts after a loss and frustration after a loss is normal. It means the guys care. It means that they want to win, and I don't have any problem with that. That's not to me. That's not to me a detriment. That means that the guys are passionate about what they're doing, and that they want the result to be different. And I think that's great personally, because if you got guys that care and you got guys that want to keep going, and they are frustrated by losing, that makes me feel really good that we can find ways to fix whatever it is and be able to win. But I love the locker room. Our guys are made of the right stuff. I've not wavered on that one bit. And that's because I see it every day. And you guys see some of it, but you don't see all of it. And you see the after the game, and you see the back and forth. And look, that's pro football. It's emotional. Guys get that way. There's times when I'm emotional too, but again, that makes me feel like we got the right people that want to win and want to do what it takes to win, and they do that. They do everything we ask them to do, and they work their ass off. And I have no doubts about what our locker room is made of.
No doubts about what the locker room is made of. I love this answer from Brian Callahan. I love the way that he defends Calvin Ridley and says, hey, this shows a guy who wants to win. Ultimately, that's all you can ask for as a head coach and as a fan base. So often I feel that media and fans and just the narrative around professional sports criticizes athletes like Calvin Ridley for speaking their mind, for answering honestly. And sometimes it comes out harsh, right? He's dropping expletives and stuff, and he's very frustrated. And that's a good thing to me. That's okay. We also criticize athletes for when they get in the locker room and they're like, what if Calvin Ridley's response to my question was this? Hey, Calvin, what was wrong? A lot of targets, no catches. What do you feel like was off? Man, I don't know. At the end of the day, I got my $92 million and I don't know. What if that was Calvin Ridley's response? We'd be sitting here roasting him, rightfully so, for not caring enough about his team and not caring enough about winning, for being all about the money, for being a me guy. I don't think this is Calvin Ridley being a me guy saying, I want the ball. This is Calvin Ridley saying, let me help the team. This is a guy who wants to win, who's watching garbage offense, is bored. I'm bored too. I didn't hate his answer in any way. I actually really liked it. I like that he feels comfortable doing it. And, because of what I just said, because I think so often, as soon as a guy says something, it becomes like a culture problem. I like that Brian Callahan is quick to jump to his defense and says, you know what, this just shows me he wants to win. And I'd much rather have that than somebody who's unbothered by the fact that he didn't catch the ball at all, that he's not getting targets because his money's guaranteed. So credit to Brian Callahan for that. Credit to Calvin Ridley for being himself. I think that we need to celebrate this more than we villainize it in sports now. However, there was one thing that I didn't love. There was a couple, more than one thing. Let me just say, the press conference was not all great from Brian Callahan. And one of the things that I raised an eyebrow at is how Brian Callahan spoke about Will Levis's shoulder injury. I'll remind all of you, Will Levis sprained his AC joint on Monday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins. He is removed from that game for Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph comes in. He manages the football game. Does it well enough to win. Did they ask him to do much? Absolutely not. He threw once in the second half, but they won the game. The thought coming into Indy after the bye week was, it's still Will's job. Will's going to play, but Will's only going to play if he's healthy enough to play. And that's not just healthy enough to go out there. It's his ability to execute all of his quarterback duties. We knew he was going to be playing through pain, but how was Will Levis going to respond to were there going to be ramifications, effects on his arm that was going to limit him from making certain throws, from throwing from certain arm angles, from taking certain hits if he's running? If he can't do the job of quarterback, you had to go with Mason Rudolph. The Titans assessed him over the week of practice, said he was good to go. I watched Will Levis during practice. I also thought he was good to go. He looked good. But after the game, Will Levis commented about his fourth quarter interception that he threw up for Calvin Ridley. He kind of underthrew the ball and it got picked. He said it was a throw that he feels like on a healthier day he would be able to make. Now, of course, this, got my attention, got a lot of people's attention, right? Like, if Will Levis is saying, I can make that throw if I'm healthy, but I'm not healthy. Well, now you're getting into that territory the Titans said very clearly they wanted to avoid, where you have a quarterback who's not healthy enough to make plays and is still pressing to make plays, and it's being detrimental to your offense. Brian Callahan was asked about his assessment of Will Levis's shoulder leading up to the game, and I guess the hindsight that he has looking back now. And the Titans head coach contradicted his quarterback.
Will said that the shoulder was not 100%, but it was healthy enough for him to where he felt like he could go out and win the game.
Yeah.
But then he also said that on the interception, he felt like that had his shoulder been better, he could have made a better throw.
Sure.
How do you balance that, and what kind of was the situation with his arm yesterday?
Everything leading up to the game and in practice and everything felt like he's good enough to make the throws that he needed to make to win the game. And I didn't have any reservations necessarily about that. I didn't think there was any real ill effect. I mean, I knew there was going to be some pain. That's just part of it. I appreciate him trying to manage that and fight through it for his teammates and for our team. I didn't see anything that would have made me feel like he wasn't able or willing to actually be able to play at the level he needed to play at. That throw at the interception, he had pressure kind of in his face, and he couldn't quite get everything into it anyway. I don't know that an arm strength would have a healthy shoulder would have made much of a difference, truthfully. But he's whatever he had to say is how he felt. But I didn't feel anything going into the week that would lead me to believe that he wasn't ready to.
So Callahan clearly not on the same page here, because Levis clearly said he feels like on a healthy week he makes that throw. Callahan says, I don't think that the shoulder had anything to do with that interception. It was the pressure and the fact that Levis wasn't able to get everything into the throw because of how he was positioned in the pocket. So there is a clear sort of disconnect, which, isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's also not something that I love. I don't think Brian Callahan had great answers for questions about Will Levis in Monday's press conference, whether it be the shoulder, whether it be the conservative game plan, whether it be this idea that, right, the Titans have made their entire season's goal about finding out what Will Levis is, and yet the Titans seem afraid to let Will Levis turn it loose and really get those answers. Why is that? What is their priority? He answered and said that their priority is winning and finding a way to win by any means necessary. But if your way of winning, if you've identified the way that we can easiestly win this football game, if that is putting Will Levis in bubble wrap and not letting him do anything, you're kind of giving an answer about how you feel about him, which is that you can't let him play free and also trust that you're going to win a football game. That's damning. This is just another example of what I feel like has a lot of people concerned right now, which is that the messaging from the coaching staff is not matching the on-field product, and it's not always matching the messaging from some of these players. Levis feels like the shoulder was a factor. Callahan feels like the shoulder was not a factor. Callahan talks about wanting to find out what Levis is, and yet we've got him not really throwing the ball. We've got messages saying we need to get DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley involved, and then DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley aren't on the field on 1st and 10 in the first half of a football game. Make it make sense. There's a lot of things right now that aren't making sense, and probably because guys are hesitant to say the truth when things are not going well at 1-4. Those are some of my takeaways. Those are some of the things that stood out. There will be a lot more content because this is a chaotic week. Amidst all of this, the Titans are trying to get ready for a game against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo, which is staring down the barrel of 1-5, if we're being honest with ourselves. Nobody's going to come and save them. That's what the Titans have been saying. I'll say it to you all here. Nobody's going to come and save this team. They're going to have to find the answers for themselves if they don't want things to continue to spiral past the point of no return. But it was ugly. It was ugly at St. Thomas Sports Park today. Callahan was facing some heat, and I don't think the heat's going to dial back anytime soon. We need answers. That's all I got for you. Till tomorrow on the A to Z Sports Morning Show, where Austin Stanley and Zach Bingham will be there until tomorrow night when I tune in with A to Z Sports Primetime. Tighten up.